The Russian diplomats who were ordered to leave the U.S. over alleged cyber attacks have now left the country just before the end of their 72-hour deadline. The Russian embassy has been quoted as saying now that all 35 diplomats expelled by President Barack Obama have left the United States. On Thursday, Obama ordered the expulsion of the diplomats and closed 2 Russian compounds in Maryland and New York as part of punitive measures against Moscow. The Russian president has rejected the allegations and refused to take retaliatory measures for the time being. Vladimir Putin said that he'll wait until January 20th to see what Donald Trump does after taking office before he decides on further steps in Russia-U.S. relations. Now we're joined out of Washington by Mr. James Jotras, former U.S. Senate foreign policy analyst. Hello, Mr. Jotras, and thanks for joining us on the program, sir. Now, your views on the expulsion of so many diplomats in a single stroke in this Washington-Moscow row?
I think it's purely political. Even if President Obama is convinced that the Russians had actually engaged in the kind of activity he claims, and I think the evidence for that is quite flimsy, even if he believed it, there was no reason for him to rush this through in the closing days of his presidency. Clearly, this was designed for political goals, to try to box the incoming Trump administration in and to spoil prospects for rapprochement with Moscow. If that was his intention, and I think it was, I don't think it worked because Mr. Putin declined to take the bait. He has held off, and I think really made President Obama look even more ridiculous than he already did.
And we've seen rhetoric out of the president-elect's camp, also out of Moscow, which seems like there's going to be a warming of relations between the incoming president and President Vladimir Putin. Do you agree with this narrative, or do you think that Putin might be in for a rude awakening once Donald Trump takes office?
I think Donald Trump has been quite consistent in stating that even under very intense political attacks from both parties, really, the entire establishment here is mobilized against his warming of relations. And it was already mobilized to do that before he named Rex Tillerson to be his Secretary of State. Nonetheless, he hasn't backed down, and he keeps going back to that theme over and over again. So I can't but conclude that he's very sincere in wanting to move in that direction. Now, whether he can do that, whether people within his establishment who may disagree with him and agree more with the political establishment here in Washington may try to undermine him, I don't know, but he seems quite determined to move in that direction.
And what kind of evidence have we seen so far of this alleged hacking by the Russians into the Democratic party's campaign, whatever, computers or whatnot? I mean, is it circumstantial? Is it even concrete, or is it just something that's been thrown out there?
I wouldn't even call it circumstantial. Look, let's be honest. We know that countries spy on each other. They engage in cyber activities against each other, and this is both friendly countries and hostile countries. Dozens and dozens of countries around the world do this. And what the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security released was kind of a description of how those activities are conducted. Very little that indicates that the Russians were directly responsible for any hacks on the Democratic National Committee. There is strong reason to believe that those were in fact leaks, not hacks. And as people have pointed out, like John McAfee, top expert in cybersecurity, pointed out, if somebody wanted to hack in and make it look like somebody else, the people who are capable of doing the hacking are also capable of hiding their tracks with bogus IP addresses and using software that can't be attributed to them.
I saw that take you're talking about. Thank you much for your contribution to the program, Mr. Jotras. One more time, James Jotras, former U.S. Senate foreign policy analyst, joining us out of Washington.